Dan Lanning knocked it out of the park.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Today's show, jam-packed. Plenty of thoughts on Ross Douglas, Oregon's new wide receivers coach coming over from Syracuse. I love the hire. It's baseball season, so there are going to be plenty of baseball metaphors on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Yes, that is right. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's a pretty good deal. Great deal, as a matter of fact. And I think Oregon's got a great deal here in hiring Ross Douglas to replace Junior Adams. So Adams, in a surprise move, goes to the Dallas Cowboys to be the wide receiver coach, and Dan Lanning just goes back to the drawing board, flips through his little Rolodex, and three-run blasts to right center field. That's the way that this looks. So this is another young, up-and-coming coach for Dan Lanning to have on his staff, which fits with the mold of a lot of the coaches, frankly. You know, Tosh Lupoy isn't that old by college football coaching standards, and he's one of the more elder statesman coaches that Oregon has on the staff. One of the most elder statesman coaches, by the way, Mike Cavanaugh, the assistant offensive line coach, he is gone from the staff, going back to Oregon State where he's been previously, where he will be the full-time offensive line coach. But Douglas, I think this is a phenomenal move. He is 30 years old. This guy is not very old. Fran Brown, his former head coach at Syracuse, Brown was on staff at Georgia prior to taking the Syracuse job, who did a great job this past season. The Orange went 10-3, beat Miami, and kept them out of the college football playoff in the last week of the regular season, and then they won their bowl game as well against Washington State. Douglas is only 30. He played at Michigan from 2013 to 15, Rutgers from 2016 to 17, a pre-transfer portal transfer guy. You don't see that every day. And then he was undrafted going into the NFL draft in 2018. So he became a graduate assistant with Rutgers, where he was for a couple of seasons. And then he did make the jump up to the NFL. Before he was 30 years old, he was a defensive quality control coach for the New England Patriots. Then he shifted back over to the offensive side of the ball. He was the assistant wide receivers coach. And then in his third year in New England, he became the full-time wide receivers coach. That was in 2023. Now, those teams, offensively, not much to write home about. But Syracuse this past year is what should make you optimistic about what he can bring to the table at Oregon. Because this past year, in his lone season with the Qs, he got hired in December of 2023. So he had, some time to get a recruiting cycle in there. I'll talk about that in a moment. But Kyle McCord, the Ohio State transfer, was the leading passer in all of college football. Not Cam Ward, who's going to be a top 10 pick, maybe the number one overall pick. Kyle McCord was the leading passer in college football this past year with over 4,700 yards through the air. Not too shabby. Now, Douglas was, of course, overseeing the wide receivers for that great season with Syracuse, and there were two wide receivers that had at least 900 yards, one of whom had a 1,000-yard season, and they both had 7 or more touchdowns. And there was a tight end on the roster who also had 900-plus yards and 7 or more touchdowns. So this was a crazily productive group of pass catchers and an offense that was just really good all throughout the year. McCord had some turnover problems at times that held them back, but they went 9-3 in the regular season, and that was in Fran Brown's first year at the helm. And Fran Brown has said, again, that's Syracuse's head coach, for those of you that don't know, he believes that Ross Douglas will make a great head coach one day. So I don't know how long Douglas sticks around in Eugene, but in the short term, it is really hard to argue with the one season he has had as a position coach at the college level. Had one such season with the Patriots and one with Syracuse, and now he comes over to Oregon. So clearly an ambitious guy, as a lot of coaches are, particularly young coaches. Not a surprise there. But the track record early on in this guy's career, really, really good. So that's the first reason that That's the main reason that I'm bullish on this hire, is you just pulled the wide receiver coach from the best passing offense in the country. No notes. So my brother told me about the Dexter Original Sin season finale, which I'm going to watch after I record this show. No notes. No notes. I imagine I won't have any there either. Dexter, great show. 10 out of 10, 5 stars, highly recommend. But whilst at Syracuse for the class of 2025, the guys that Douglas recruited are not going to blow you away. He brought in Darian Williams, the number 94 wide receiver, according to 24/7. He's from the state of New York. Julian McFadden, 127th ranked wide receiver from Pennsylvania. Gabe Daniels, the 140th ranked wide receiver from Georgia. Again, these are from the states of Georgia, high school recruits, and Darius Johnson, the number 248 ranked wide receiver from Florida. So not an incredible track record there, but factor in that he was at Syracuse and did pull in a transfer in Tyshawn Russell from South Carolina, who graded as a 3-star transfer. All those other guys were 3-star recruits as well. So certainly he goes to a place in Oregon where he has got a much higher recruiting potential. That's the unknown entity here with him, because coaching college wide receivers, being a part of offensive game planning, and getting production out of that group, hard to argue with what he did this past year. It was only one season, but it was also the first season. And Fran Brown, however he came across Coach Douglas here, when he was putting together a staff, said, I want that guy to be my wide receivers coach. So I don't put a lot of stock in the 2023 Patriots season he had when nothing really worked there offensively. I put far more stock in what they did at Syracuse this past year. They were one of the surprise teams under the radar in all of college football, and he was a part of that. So the recruiting is certainly a question. The production, though, is not. And when Junior Adams left, the two questions I had about whoever they would hire to replace him were, okay, well, how is he going to recruit? Because Adams did this in a way that no wide receiver coach has ever done at the University of Oregon in my entire life, or I think anybody's life for that matter. And the production from the wide receiver room, also outstanding. So I think from a coaching standpoint, the Ducks are pretty set here. The question is, two questions: how long will he stick around? And can he recruit? What do you do when you go into kids' homes or meet them on visits or go watch their games and you got that green O instead of that orange S on your jacket? How does that change for him? What sort of foundation did Junior Adams lay? It's really, really good. And I'll get to the wide receiver room he's dealing with for the second segment on today's show. But from a recruiting standpoint, for the class of 2026, he's got to hit the ground running. There are a couple guys, Chris Henry included, who's the number 1 wide receiver in the class of 2026, currently committed to Ohio State. Those are the sorts of big targets that Oregon has gone after in the last couple cycles. Right now, they don't have a wide receiver commit. We'll see how he does, but he's got to hit the ground running on the recruiting trail. But certainly, I'm not putting. I think it's worth acknowledging that in his 1 year at Syracuse, he didn't do anything that was overly incredible or noteworthy on the recruiting trail, but I also am fully aware that, he's got a better situation in Oregon. They're able to go after a higher caliber recruit. We'll see how he's able to close the deal. So I love this hire. I'm all about it. Let me know what you think below in the YouTube comments or on Twitter as well. He's coming into a situation, Ross Douglas, that is pretty great. Pretty darn great. A wide receiver room that once again is up there with the most talented in Oregon history. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your bets into a same-game parlay. Plus, college football, readily available. Oregon's got a win total, Big Ten title odds, national title odds, the whole 9 yards. 10 yards, 100 yards, everything that you want, FanDuel has got it. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's all you have to do. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So Coach Douglas is coming into a pretty darn good situation that still poses significant questions going into next year. The wide receiver room for Oregon and the defensive backfield are undergoing as much year-over-year change as you could possibly have while maintaining some pretty high expectations. I think my expectations are higher for the wide receivers than the defensive backs because there are a few more questions over there. The questions in the secondary are different to me than the ones that are in the wide receiver room. The receiver room is more about how it's going to work out. The defensive backfield is, will it work out? Will it be Thieneman and a bunch of guys who are fighting for playing time, trying to figure out who the starters are and such, or how's it going down? The receiver room, it's which talented or veteran guy is stepping up, or is a young guy jumping into the fold. So, of course, the biggest name in Oregon's wide receiver room right now is Dakorien Moore, and that's a pretty good parting gift for Junior Adams to have left for Ross Douglas behind, the number one wide receiver in the class of 2025. Fully expect him to have a role. But that's not the only reason that he has a really good situation and a talented group of guys to come in and work with for this Oregon passing attack, most likely going to be led by Dante Moore at quarterback, of course. But you've got Evan Stewart back for his fourth season of college football. He's going to be drafted in the NFL one day. You've got Malik Benson, the Florida State transfer, who was once upon a time one of the top JUCO receivers that hasn't quite found a role yet, and he's a real wild card in this room to me. I could see him being Oregon's second leading receiver. I don't think he's going to suddenly pop and be the leading guy. I'd say Evan Stewart or Dakorien Moore are the most likely players on that front, but I could see him being number 2 in receiving yards by the end of the 2025 season. I could see him being number 7 by the end of the season. I am dead serious, as always. And he's just kind of a wild card because at Alabama and Florida State, for different reasons, it just hasn't worked out. He hasn't really seen the field or gotten the share of targets that, maybe maximizes his potential. Does that happen at Oregon, or does he get beat out by other guys again? Because Oregon's had a relationship with Malik Benson for quite a while, going back to his time coming out of the JUCO ranks a couple of seasons ago when he originally went to Alabama. But I don't know. We'll see. There's plenty of potential there to be sure, but he's yet to crack 400 yards in a Power 4 college football season, so I don't place the same weight of expectations on him as I do maybe an Evan Stewart, for instance. But there are a lot of guys in this room that I think are easy to forget about. 2 in particular, Gary Bryant Jr. and Justice Lowe. Remember, first guy off the bench this year. Now, Gary Bryant Jr. was hurt, so maybe it would have been different, but Justice Lowe was really good. Really good. Stepped up in the Rose Bowl with Evan Stewart out. Had a great game against Illinois, catching his first career touchdown. He stepped up in the Ohio State game when Trayshawn Holden had the spitting incident and got ejected. And Justice Lowe is going into his 4th year of college football. Plenty of fans out there send me messages or drop comments all the time about, man, I want Oregon to play their high school kids more. You develop them, give them a chance. Justice Lowe just got a huge chance and thrived in it this past year. And there were plenty of quotes around fall camp, I think it was last season, that were bullish on what Justice Lowe's potential is. And I don't think he's really like any other receiver in Oregon's room. He can play inside, could play outside as well. He mostly filled in for Tez Johnson when Tez was hurt this past year. But guy has got great speed, good hands, good size, great route runner. Like the touchdown he caught against Illinois just gets a great release off the line of scrimmage, and then DG dropped the ball in the bucket, and it was just a great play overall. So that's a guy who can absolutely be a big part of this wide receiver room. And then you've got Kyler Casper also going into his 4th year, and I think would have had a bigger role this season if he hadn't gotten hurt. That was also one of those storylines that flew under the radar this past season because of how productive the room was with Evan Stewart, Tez, and Trayshawn Holden. But then you've still got Jerion Dickey, who we haven't really seen anything from. He's hurt his first year and wasn't able to crack the rotation this past year, but he was a 5-star wideout coming out of high school. And then you've got Jeremiah McLaughlin, who's and that's not even everyone in the room, but based on what we saw when Oregon put the second-team offense in a year ago, that's the way the top wide receivers are likely to shake out. And McLaughlin, super highly rated guy coming out of high school. So the talent in this room that Ross Douglas has to work with is really tremendous. It is really, really good. And in this 3-year run of wide receivers that Oregon has had, best in program history. And I don't know that there's a close second. I'm 100% bullish and nostalgic about the days of Jeff Mail and Josh Huff and Braylon Addison, and those guys were really good. But the depth of this wide receiver room is crazy good. Crazy good. And I'm curious. I want you guys to drop some predictions below or hit me up on Twitter whenever you listen to or watch this show. I'm curious how you all think this plays out. Because what if Dakorien Moore isn't ready game 1? Oregon's playing Montana State. So in some form or fashion, Dakorien should see the field. Because notably, there has never been an instance in which Oregon struggles with a high-end FCS team at home in week 1. I can't recall that ever happening. So Oregon's locked in to winning by 30 or 40 or 70 in that game, and Dakorien will get a bunch of run. But can you imagine? Can you imagine the number of people that have tracked Dakorien Moore's recruitment from almost a year ago at this time to what they'll be feeling? Me. Imagine what I'll be feeling. And many of you as well. When he catches his first pass, we're all going to be holding our breath. What's he going to do? What's it going to look like? How's it going to go? I am very excited for him. No doubt about it. But I feel great about this room. And from a production standpoint, if you heard the numbers or remember the numbers that I laid out earlier about Syracuse's wide receiver room this past year, they had 2 guys with 900 plus yards, one of whom cracked 1,000 yards. Jackson Meeks, really talented receiver that he was able to come in and just coach right away. And that's kind of what he's going to be asked to do again here at Oregon, and I have no reservations about that. Will Oregon have 2 900 plus yard receivers? I doubt it. They actually had 3 with a tight end, but 2 guys on the outside, I mean, with that many guys in the room, kind of feels like it's difficult. As talented as Oregon's receiver room has been the last couple of years, when Troy and Tez both had 1,000-yard seasons in 2023, yeah, I and many others feel like Trayshawn Holden was slightly underutilized in that season. I'll grant you that, but it's hard to have that level of production or to expect it when you have this many guys that are that talented in the room. And you remember Bo Nix threw for 4,500 yards in that season, and I certainly don't place that level of expectation on Dante Moore in his first full year starting either, presuming he wins the job again, because that hasn't been officially announced. That's the expectation. That's my expectation, and that of many others as well. So I'm bullish on this receiver room for a 3rd straight year, and I think Douglas is going to be able to get what Oregon needs out of them offensively to be back in the Big Ten championship hunt, make the college football playoff, and who knows, prove me wrong and make a run and whatnot to the national championship game. But the question that I have, I always evaluate position coaches in 3 areas. How do you recruit? How do you develop? And what's the production like from that room? So I've seen the production element. Great. Hasn't really had a chance to show whether he can recruit and develop guys over the course of many years. And heck, he might not ever get that chance at Oregon if he finds an opportunity elsewhere. He's already been in the NFL once. Fran Brown says he'll make a great head coach one day. Could be super ambitious. Could be a one and done in Oregon. We don't really know. But for 2025, I think this is a great hire by Dan Lanning. And that position room is very, very talented. One national pundit picked Oregon to win it all. Well, I mean, maybe. All right, mailbag question to wrap up today's show, which you can get in on anytime as well. YouTube comments, Twitter, DMs, and mentions are both wide open for @LockedOnDucks or @SMcLaughlinCFB. If you want priority access and a bunch of other perks as well, you can become a Locked On Ducks insider. Link in the description below, where you can get a free 14-day trial. Zaheem sent this one in via the good old YouTube comments. He says, mailbag Q, JD Pickell, I think Pickell maybe, not sure, at On3, picked Oregon to win the Natty. Thoughts? I'll have what he's having, man. Look, there were 2 game day pundits last year that picked Oregon to win the national championship, and understandably so. I frankly think national championship predictions right now are slightly premature for picking a particular team a lot gets revealed in spring football and frankly in fall camp. You can have injuries that can affect the season. You can have position battles not go how you thought. We still have another spring transfer portal window. So I respect the fact that JD realizes what Oregon is capable of and realizes that Oregon is recruiting at a level that national championship winning teams tend to do and bringing in transfer portal talent to fill some key spots in individual places. But I think that's a bit early, right? Both on this calendar and I think with this Oregon team. You've got a first-year starting quarterback in Dante Moore. I know he started games at UCLA, but he didn't even begin that season, which is a weird situation to be in. I haven't known those, change to the young guy mid-season to be a result of a year that's going particularly well, mainly because the two that pop into my head are in college, are Dante Moore at UCLA, where he wasn't a starter, then he was a starter, then he got benched, and then he transferred, of course, sat this past year behind Dylan Gabriel, which I think will be great for him. And then the other example is Justin Herbert, 2016. Started Dakota Prukop. Wasn't going as well as you hoped. Let's play the young kid, build for the future. Justin Herbert, that worked out, I'd say, pretty darn well. And he's doing pretty darn well in the NFL. He needs more receivers who don't, drop the football. But he's got one. Lad McConkey's like 5.5 feet tall, but he's really good. So at least there is that for our old pal Justin Herbert. Bringing this back to Oregon, though. First year starting quarterbacks, hard to win a national championship. Think about this. J.J. McCarthy for Michigan was not in his first year starting. This past year, Will Howard, first year at Ohio State, not his first year as a starter. 2022, Stetson Bennett, second year as a starter. 2021, Stetson Bennett, I don't remember if he'd started before, but I know he'd been at Georgia for a very long time, had played a lot of football. COVID year, Mac Jones, multi-year starter. 2019, Joe Burrow. Did you know that was his second season? He transferred from Ohio State. People remember that. He played a season in 2018 at LSU, and then in 2019, everything popped. So the last quarterback to start in his first year and win a national championship, I believe was Trevor Lawrence. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. Trevor Lawrence at Clemson. And Dante Moore, incredibly talented guy. Trevor Lawrence, generational quarterback prospect. Dante Moore doesn't have that expectation for him right now. Could in the future. He can make it happen. But I think that's the challenging element on the one hand. And then on the other hand, there's just so much that's resetting on this Oregon team and why I would like to see a lot of young guys on the field this fall so that come 2026, they're ready to reach their full potential and make an even better run. But, it's not crazy to pick Oregon to win the Big Ten. It's not crazy to pick Oregon to make the playoff. I will pick them to do at least one of those things, maybe both. We'll see how it goes along. I won't make my full game-by-game record prediction till August, probably, because a lot happens between now and then. Hence how I give you a show all year round. And I appreciate you if you all listen every day. I know you all don't, but that's all right. Anyway, but I don't think it's reasonable to expect. I get where JD is coming from an outside vantage point. I have a national college football show. And you inform yourself as much as you can so that you can, have these sorts of takes and formulate those sorts of informed opinions. I don't think JD's making an uninformed opinion here. I just don't think he has the same level of detailed knowledge necessarily that I do covering the Ducks. In fact, I'd go out on a fairly strong limb and say, yeah, he definitely does not. But do I understand the progression of Dan Lanning, the way that Oregon is recruited, the players that they do have, Dante Moore's potential? Yeah, I can see all that. And you know what? I would love more than anything in the entire world to be proven wrong. 100%. There's nothing I would love more. I will be rooting for that, hoping for it, disappointed when it doesn't happen. But will I be expecting it, as I was this past season, to have that sort of chance? No. I think Oregon this year is comparable to, what is maybe Penn State from last year, more than good enough to get in the playoff, win a game or two, find a way, maybe you can even get to the national championship game. They were very close to doing it, but they came up 3 points short. And they're going to have a better chance to do it because everyone's coming back in 2026. That's what I see Oregon as this year. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. Crazy things can't happen or breaks can't go your way if you don't get a chance. So, thoughts on Oregon winning it all this year? Yeah, I respect it, JD. I hope you're right. I hope I'm wrong. And let's jot this segment down in our memory banks for when the season rolls around and Oregon just makes a charge. One thing leads to another, and they win it all. So, normally, I wrap today's show with basketball talk because Oregon had a game against Rutgers yesterday as you're listening to or watching this show. But, fun fact, I'm on a little trip, so I recorded this on Saturday night when the news about Ross Douglas dropped, so I will have a basketball reaction to whatever that game is. I pray it's to an Oregon win. That'll be on tomorrow's show. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.